Hello and welcome to the first modification video of my brand new Axial SCX10 early Ford Bronco. When I got that out of the box, I kind of wondered how long would it go before I started modifying it. Would I basically just drive it as is for a while? Would I take some time to kind of plan out my modifications and plan out what I want to do with it, or would I dive right into it? Well, the answer is I waited a whole 15 minutes from the time I wrapped up that unboxing video to the time I started modifying. It did not stay stock for long. I shot the unboxing video, I took it outside for some glamour shots out on the beach, and brought it in and said, let's get started. So, the very first thing I did was I removed the hood scoop. And you heard me talk about that in the earlier episode, that the hood scoop and I just, we didn't get along. So that was the very first modification that went on. And from there, I kind of started to expand. But in the process of trying to figure out how I wanted to make the Bronco look, I also wanted to take a step back and take a look at some of the history of the Ford Bronco, and also make some corrections from the unboxing video that I learned since then. So first of all, the Ford Bronco came out in 1966. It was I kind of identified that was a market that Ford was not playing in. So International had their Scout, and American Motors had their Jeep. And the Jeep, of course, was built on kind of the premise of the original U.S. Army Jeep from World War II. The Willys company was building those during World War II. They got purchased by American Motors, and they were producing an off-road, all-terrain type vehicle based on what they had for knowledge from building World War II Jeeps. Now, Ford Motor Company also had knowledge of building Jeeps during the war, as they too built Jeeps for the U.S. Army during the war. In fact, if you can always find a Ford-built Jeep versus a Jeep from anybody else, because on the top of all the fasteners, they had the cursive F stamped into all the fasteners. So that's how you can tell if you have a Ford-built Army Jeep versus one from another manufacturer. And there's all sorts of people that worked on building Jeeps during the war. But afterwards, Ford still had that knowledge of building off-road vehicles that were now dominating that market with Jeep and International. So Lee Iacocca, the father of the Ford Mustang, started to look at what options there are to build an off-road vehicle, and it was the Bronco is what they came up with, and it was originally called from a project name the GOAT, and I believe GOAT was go over any terrain. You know, basically that was the mission statement for the vehicle, which is exactly how the GOAT mode we have today on the current Bronco and Bronco Sport got their name, except for I believe it's actually go over any terrain is the GOAT mode, and go over all terrain is the original. It's either that or they're vice versa. But that's where the GOAT comes from, that is associated with the Bronco. It's from the original project name. So it came out in 1966. It had three versions. It had a truck version, which was basically like a pickup truck. So if you took this roll cage off, you would actually be very similar to what the truck version was. There was a Roadster, which was also like the truck, had no back end on it, but it had these cutaway door inserts. So it had no opening and closing doors. It had like these weird insert things. Then there was the Wagon, which had doors and a full back on it. So a few years later, the Roadster version went away, and that was no longer available, and then it was basically the pickup version and the Wagon. I had considered this a 66 Bronco in my unboxing video, but after digging into it a little bit more, it's actually not a 66. It is most likely a 1970 Bronco. And the reason is in 66, when it launched, it did not have the side marker lights that you see up here on the fender and the rear quarter panel. Those came later, and when they arrived in, I think, 67 or 68, they were actually placed down much lower on the body towards the bumpers. It wasn't until 70 that they moved them higher. And where they sit today on this particular model, they would have either had a 289 badge or a 302 badge, which was the same badge that was used on the Ford Mustang. It had that like V shape with the cubic inch displacement written on it. So those went away, and the side marker lights moved up. Also, 1970 was the first year of the Bronco Sport, And the red badging up here next to the Bronco text is actually the Sport badge. So this is most likely a 1970 Bronco Sport, or maybe a few model years thereafter. So it would have been right around that time period. It would have come from the factory with a normally aspirated 302, which is fitting because this one is a kind of a resto mod with a modern 302 Coyote engine underneath the hood. So there you go. There's a little bit of a brief history on the Ford Bronco and kind of how it came to life, and that this particular one is a 1970 or newer Bronco Sport. All right, so now let's get into the modification. So now that I knew what model years I'd be looking for inspiration, I decided the first thing I would do after that hood scoop was removed and tossed off to the side. I couldn't get rid of that thing fast enough. I went along the front fender here, and there was an SCX10 3 badge on it below the Bronco, and I actually cut that off and just peeled it off. So now it just has the Bronco Sport nomenclature on it. I also went through and I painted the Ford badge up here silver, and then also went and painted the marker lights, the turn signal lights in the front with clear amber, and that's a Tamiya paint that you can use to replicate turn signals. Now, some of the early Broncos actually had a clear lens, and later ones had the amber colored one, but I wanted to kind of give it a little bit more color and kind of bring some attention to the nose, so I actually painted those the amber color, which would have been correct for a 1970 edition Bronco Sport. I also did a thin outline of silver around the perimeter of the grille, but I'm still not totally happy with how that grille looks. So that's gonna probably be something I'm gonna look at updating from RC four-wheel drive. That way it's actually see-through and clear all the way down into the sheet metal behind it, and then open to the radiator. And in fact, it's amazing, when you take this body off, the radiator and fan are actually molded into the backing of the front grille and where the headlights go out, but you can't see it. It's one of these really awesome features that the designers put in here that you can't see. So I'm hoping by doing a little work on the front grille there, I can kind of bring out some attention to that radiator and also make the front grille look a little bit more realistic. So from there, I kind of looked at the vehicle, and I was really torn on what to do with the blue stripe on the hood and the blue stripe down the side. I really like the royal blue and white combination. I think that color combination works really well. If you remember from my unboxing video, I've talked about how I have used that exact color on a lot of my cars. That blue and white combination is one of my all-time favorites. But it really just, it didn't have that classy look that I wanted my Bronco to have. It almost looked like a competition rig with a sponsor decals on the back, and it just, something about it wasn't quite right. But I really liked the blue, but it was also hiding this really awesome body character line that runs along the side of the vehicle. And after looking at pictures of both full-scale Broncos and SCX10 early Ford Broncos that they had removed the stripe, I decided that I will go ahead and do the same thing. And then boom, it instantly started to look a little bit cleaner and classier. It really, I think, just sets the vehicle off to remove the graphics and not have them on there, which is usually the opposite, right? You add the graphics to kind of highlight the vehicle and bring more attention to it. Where here, I think the understated look of removing them actually looks much better. You get a very nice, well-defined body line down the side here. You also get a good view of the creases inside the hood here, where it's raised around the engine. I will replace the hood scoop. I do have one on order from RC four-wheel drive, and the design of that hood scoop, even though a hood scoop is pointless for this particular motor because fuel injection and the intake is over to the side, that hood scoop will cover up the 3 holes on the top, as well as it is the exact same shape of the hood scoop that's on my full-scale Mustang. So definitely something I wanted to do. Now to paint that, I could either leave it black, which would tie in well with the roll cage and the bumpers and fender flares, but I do think I want to paint it white. I grabbed a couple different shades of white that I had available, and they're all too cool. They're all, I say cool in the sense that they have more blues or grays into them, and this really does appear to be Wimbledon white. And Wimbledon white, being an official Ford color in the 1960s, is more of like a warm white. It has more of like a yellowish, tones to it. It's softer. My dad used to say it was like the color of vanilla ice cream. And that really is the color of this Bronco. And in pictures, you don't really catch it. It's kind of like after you get all the graphics off and you look at it under certain lighting, it becomes more obvious that this is probably Wimbledon white. So when I do get my hood scoop and drop it on here, I will have it painted body color and try to match this Wimbledon white the very best that I can. So with all the graphics off of it, I then moved into removing the front license plate from the nose. This is going to end up being a Michigan-based Bronco, not a California one, and thankfully we don't have to have front license plate in our state. So that front license plate has been yanked off. The rear one still says California, but I will get that changed here shortly with a personalized license plate. Then I started moving to the interior, right? So the interior's got so much going on that right now it's all just kind of like draped in black from the factory. And I decided, well, let's try to spruce that up a little bit. So I took the steering wheel off, painted the spokes silver, painted the turn signal sock silver. I'm probably gonna leave the black hand grip area, but I could actually paint that wood grain because they did come with a wood grain steering wheel, very similar to the Mustang Rally wheel, which is a beautiful steering wheel. But this one, the diameter is actually a little bit smaller than the wood grain would have been, so I may keep it with the black grip of an aftermarket steering wheel versus the wood grain of an original one. And this car probably didn't have power steering, so they needed a large diameter steering wheel in order to get the leverage to turn the wheels. But with a modern engine in it, it's probably got power steering. You don't need the big steering wheel. Then came a few other cosmetic mods to the interior. The side sills here were white. I decided just to cover them with black vinyl. They looked a little goofy to have this big white step in the doorway there, so I took that out. But I think the thing you guys are probably all noticing is the seats. So those funky looking bucket seats had to go. They're very weird shaped. The back is very short in proportion to the size of the base. So it'd almost be like for someone who had a very short torso and then a very long hip to knee area, like that part of their leg was like massive. That's how this seat was shaped. It's just very weird looking, so I had to get rid of the seats, and I didn't know exactly what to do. So I picked up these beautiful, these are actual Axial seats. They're out of production. I found a set on eBay. These are Axial Corbeau racing seats. I had Corbeau racing seats in my one of my other cars. Loved them, and I thought, yeah, I'll put these in the Bronco. The only problem is that the Bronco isn't 1/10 scale, and the seats are exactly, if you measure them, they come out perfectly to 1/10 scale. So when you put the seats in the Bronco, unfortunately, they're too small. You really need a 1/7 or a 1/8 scale seat to fit the Bronco better, and so the seats are a little undersized right now. However, I love how they look. Even though they're too small, the look of them is awesome. They look so much better than the that weird, odd-shaped bucket that was in there. So I got rid of that. I put in these Corbeau seats from Axial. They look fantastic, just the wrong scale. I don't know how well they're going to work with a driving figure yet. I have to wait to get a figure to figure that out. But I did add the 5-point racing harness in here. It really kind of puts a lot of that attention on the interior and kind of does something to break up all that solid black inside there. I thought about taking the roll cage all apart, painting it white, but I might be able to get by with just a set of seats and harnesses to kind of jazz it up just a little bit. Where I'm stuck on the seats is whether or not I should go with a 3D printed set that would be the right scale, or leave the Corbeau ones in here that are actually very beautifully detailed. They're just the wrong size. So lesson learned there. If you guys are going to be putting racing seats in your Bronco, just let you know that they're not 1/10 scale. So if you look at 1/10 scale drift seats, 1/10 scale Corbeaus, they're not going to be the right size. And Piper's going to be here to help us out and show you how big the Bronco is because, well, she's kind of a big cat. And you can see that the Bronco is a pretty good size compared to her. So, all right. So that covered a lot of the initial modifications that I did that are cosmetic. The only performance modification that I've done so far is I lowered the chassis down. If you remember from my unboxing video, it looked like it sat too high. It sat a little bit more like a monster truck, and I wasn't happy with the stance of the vehicle. So I moved the shock pickup points from the shock mounts on the axle down to where the trailing links for the front and rear axle connect to. And that lowers it down I would say probably a good 3/8 to half of an inch. So it'd be the equivalent of putting on like a 90 millimeter shock in the stock location. I was able to keep the 100 millimeter and just change the pickup point, and the vehicle settled down to what I'd consider a better ride height for the way I want it to look, and that also will lower the center of gravity down to make it a little bit better. I did take it out for a test drive with most of the cosmetic mods done. I shot a bunch of pictures out at sunset on my beach with it before I put the seats in it, and I was really happy with how it performed. I didn't have a surface battery, so I used a 2200 3S aircraft battery, and just made sure that I was careful with it not to go in the water, not to climb over anything that could puncture or damage the battery, but it's pretty well protected under the chassis. Overall, I was blown away by the how much fun it is to drive. It's a 3S battery that I drove it on. I don't have any 2S that will work. I drove it at 50% throttle, and it had plenty of speed and power for exactly what I was looking for. Drove it around the rocks. But I could tell at the stock ride height, it could definitely come down just a little bit. It felt a little top heavy. So lowering this back down will definitely make a difference to it, and I'm anxious to get back out and test to see how it has done with the new lowered ride height. One last thing here, you'll see that I have my Turbo Timber Evolution here. This is actually the Horizon Hobby Christmas decoration from 2022, and wouldn't you know, this thing happens to scale almost exactly the right size, well, maybe a little bit small, for the Bronco. So one of the things I might be working on doing is trying to integrate how to take this ornament and actually place it inside the inside my Bronco here. That way I kind of combine two of my favorite hobbies, right? I got the surface side as well as the air side. So that's kind of why I have the airplane sitting there, is I'm gonna try to figure out how to best position it inside the Bronco here. That way it looks like I'm heading off to the flying field with my Bronco. So that covers my initial modifications to it. Like pretty much everything right now is cosmetic, very little performance modifications done besides just lowering the ride height. Now the next step is to actually go out and test it, take it out in the fields, run it, see what I think of it before going any further. Not really sure what the next steps are, so keep your eye out for the next coming videos, because I'm going to probably look at some shackles for the bumpers on it here, maybe some adjustments to the seats, maybe a driver figure, a couple other things to kind of bring more attention to the vehicle. I do have a number of RC four-wheel drive parts on order. Unfortunately, they're all on back order and may not get them until June. That will include the hood scoop and a few other pieces to it. So I am having a lot of fun working with the appearance and the modeling aspect of the Bronco. I have not painted the engine compartment yet, but I will get to that at some point. So these are still available. There are more available at Horizon Hobby, but act quickly, because it is the end of April right now, and they may not be around much longer. So if you like what you see here on the Bronco and you want to get one for yourself, make sure you do so quickly, or check your local hobby shops, because they are on an amazing deal right now, and these are really too cool to pass up. So, all right, I'm gonna get back to kind of tinkering with this thing again. Just having so much fun playing around with it and detailing it up. So I'm gonna cut this video now and take this thing back into the shop and start working on who knows what I'll come up with next. But as you look at it, there's always something that your brain just wants to do to try to make this thing even cooler than it is, which is tough when you consider that it's pretty awesome straight out of the box.